Hi, I'm Jen from House One, and today I'm showing how I turned an unfinished storage room into a home gym. With two little ones running around, my husband and I always have trouble getting to the gym. So this year we are dedicated to creating a space inside of our home. The trouble is, the only really unused space we have is an unfinished storage room in our basement. Now, I knew I wanted to conceal the storage behind closet doors, but I was pretty worried that I was going to make a small space feel even smaller. So I opted to use mirrored bypass doors to hopefully reflect light back into the room and make it feel a little larger. To get started, I first framed out the wall with 2x4s, with an opening wide enough for the two sets of bypass doors. Without a center divider, the doors can open to the sides or off to one side. I also elevated the opening to accommodate baseboard for a more built-in look. I secured the framing to the concrete floor, cinderblock exterior wall, wood-framed interior wall, and the joists above. I framed the opening with 1x and installed the track and then the doors. Once I got the mirrors installed, I realized they did make the room feel bigger, but they felt a little builder grade, so I started brainstorming ways to make them feel a little more high-end. While I was thinking that through, I decided it was time to paint the back wall. Now, since it's a cinder block wall, I used a waterproofing sealer with a high nap roller to seal the surface and to smooth out the rough texture. We don't really get a lot of moisture in our basement, but painting this wall really made the room feel a bit more like a finished space already. Having said that, this stuff goes on really thick, and I almost used a whole gallon for just this one wall. Now, looking back at the doors, I realized that the white frames and the metal valance along the top of the doors was not the custom look that I was after, so this is when I decided to replace the valance with a wood arch and paint the mirror doors. To replace the valance, I started with a 1x8 board and tacked nails into it to curve a scrap piece of wood into an arch shape. I traced the shape and then cut it using a jigsaw. I glued and nailed a 1/4 inch thick piece of trim to finish the cut edge and drilled pocket holes into the backside for installation. Next, I brought the mirrors back up into the shop for paint. Now, as I was prepping them, I did realize that there was a film of plastic on the metal frames that I first had to remove before I could scuff sand them. I don't know if this is true of all metal frames around these types of mirrors, but it did take me quite a bit of time and was unexpected. Once that was removed, I was able to scuff sand the metal and prep it for paint. Now, painting a mirror can be really difficult because if you don't get a crisp line along the edge of the mirror, it can look pretty sloppy since it's reflected back in the mirror. So I opted to tape off the main part of the mirror, but then use what's called a masking film around the edges. The gel is applied in one thick coat with a paintbrush. Once it dried, I could spray the frames with a spray paint designed for metal surfaces in matte black. After 2 coats of paint, I scored the inner edge of the frame with a utility knife and peeled back the masking gel and plastic. After the first 2 doors were complete, I knew I was on the right track. What a difference. It was now time to turn my attention to the other main walls in the space. Now, I knew I wanted to do something that had warm wood tones, since I wouldn't be using wood on the floor in the space. And I've used laminate roll vinyl in the past and had great success on smaller projects. But I was a little bit worried about trying to smooth out any wrinkles and secure it to a large wall. So I opted to use laminate click-together planks instead, because I knew that I could still glue these to the wall, but also nail them in place and they would be a little bit more secure. The boards are about a 1/4 inch thick and click together along the length, but also at their ends. So it was important to make sure that I started cutting from the right end of the board to start each row and end each row. I marked my studs and started the first row about 6 inches off the floor so I wouldn't waste an entire course behind the baseboard. In hindsight, this was pretty difficult to level and I probably should have just started at the floor, but I'm frugal, so I just took the extra time to level this row perfectly. I used construction adhesive to secure the planks and pin nails to face nail them to the studs without creating visible holes that needed to be filled. As I continued up the wall, I removed the outlet cover, marked the location of the plug, and then used a jigsaw to notch out the opening. To add the second row, the boards have to tilt into the groove. My best advice is to tack the end of the first board in place, snap the joints of the ends of the boards together, and then tap the board down to lock it in place. I continued up the wall, gluing every couple courses and nailing each board in place. On the final section of the wall, I cut out the drywall between the studs to make space for some inset shelves. I finished up that wall and then headed to the shop to build the boxes for the shelves and coat them with paint. While I was there, I also coated the baseboard and trim as well. To install the baseboard on the walls with wood framing, I used adhesive and nails. On the cinderblock wall, I used adhesive only. I used a piece of the rubber flooring as a spacer to raise the baseboards off the floor. Now I could position the wall shelves in the opening, secure them to the studs on either side, and then trim around their edges for an inset look. With the main components of this room complete, it was time to add some lighting. Now, I knew I loved the look of indirect LED lighting, but most of it that I found was pretty expensive, so I decided to make my own by sticking a strip of lighting to the back of the board and then installing it on the wall with a block at the top and bottom to hold it away from the wall. This created the glow I was after without the price tag. I also added an industrial light on the ceiling to shine more light around the room and really brighten up the space. For the flooring, I reached out to a company called US Rubber. They make a rubber floor tile that's 94% recycled rubber and mainly comes from truck tires that might have otherwise ended up in a landfill. Their products come in a ton of color combinations, and you can also pick the size of the color chip and create a custom color. I specifically chose their Eco-Lock tile in all black for a sleek look, and because it comes with removable border edges, so I don't have to cut the tabs off of all of the perimeter tiles, which will save me a ton of time. For my installation, I knew my space was 6.5 tiles wide by 8.5 tiles long, so I just started at the corner of the room and worked my way outward. But if you're working in a larger space, you'll want to start in the center of the room and work your way out in quadrants. The tiles have tabs that nest tightly together, and I found it easiest to bend in the corners of the tab and tuck them together. I tried a rubber mallet, but the tuck method just worked better for me. Once I got to the mirror wall, I cut the tiles to size using a straight edge and a utility knife. I scored the tiles several times with the blade and then separated the parts. The hardest part was cutting the tile to fit along the angled wall, but luckily I had a few extra tiles on hand in case I messed up. At this point, I loved how the room was coming together, but the back wall was pretty plain, so I created some interest by gluing and nailing the leftover wood planks to a piece of plywood, and then added an open planter box at the base. I filled the planter with some faux snake plants to bring in a little color before hanging the piece on the wall with French cleats. And with that, our new home gym was complete. I hope you enjoyed this project. For more easy woodworking projects and room makeovers, visit the House One channel on thisoldhouse.com. I'm Jenn Largesse. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. This Old House has got a video for just about every home improvement project, so be sure to check out the others. And if you like what you see, click on the subscribe button to make sure that you get our newest videos right in your feed.